On a frozen morning, a tired city bus driver is mocked and blamed as her bus gets stuck on a hill. A quiet line cook spends his own money on salt, and a rideshare helps push the bus free and is fired over speakerphone for being late. His costly choice softens a tense bus and sparks small acts of kindness that echo after, without turning him into a hero. Before we dive in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And hey, where are you tuning in from? Leave your country in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories reach. The heater on the 23 bus coughed like an old dog. It was still dark, the kind of grey that makes a city look like it's holding its breath. The driver, a woman in her early 50s with short dark hair tucked under a navy cap, wore fingerless gloves under her uniform. She had a coffee in a paper cup and a tiny plastic sink taped to the dash. She said good morning to each person who climbed the steps. A lot of them didn't say it back. A man in a cheap black puffer slid into the back row and exhaled like his lungs were too tired for the cold. He had brown skin, a shaved head, and a stubbled jaw. A grease-stained apron was stuffed in his backpack. He rubbed his hands and stared out at the snow. He smelled faintly like onions and fryer oil. A teenager in a red hoodie banged his board against his shin and bounced. An older woman pulled her scarf up to her eyes. A young mother in a puffy coat with a missing button climbed aboard slow, a baby bundled in a yellow blanket at her chest. The baby slept, mouth open. The driver read the street through streaked glass and waved at the next bus going the other way. In the mirror, eyes met eyes and then slipped away. By the third stop, the complaints started like sleet. A man in expensive blue parka with a fur hood started in about how late they already were. He had earbuds in, like he wanted to be not really here, but loud enough for everyone to hear. It's city services, he said. You know how it is. A couple of heads nodded just to have someone to agree with. The bus hit a patch of slush and did a slow little slide. The driver kept a steady hand and the bus drifted back into the lane. The parka man plucked his tongue, recorded 5 seconds of nothing, and posted it to nowhere that mattered. She doesn't know how to drive in this, he said to nobody and everybody. The driver's jaw moved once, like she might answer, then it didn't. She checked the mirror. She kept the bus talking to the street. The teen tapped his phone and snorted. Feels like the end times, he said. But he was smiling. A few people laughed because laughing at the end is always safer than arguing at the On Hawthorne Hill, the wheels spun and whined against packed snow. They were halfway up when the bus lost its bite, fishtailed an inch, and came to a slow stop by the curb. The engine hummed and clicked. Breath steamed the windows. Outside, the dog shook hard, then dragged its owner along. It was early, but not that early, and the city's plows were somewhere else doing someone else's street. Dispatch says wait for the truck, the driver said to the air. She clicked on hazards. Orange light bounced off white. The fur-hood guy sighed like someone had cut his show in the middle of his favorite scene. Of course it does, he said, throwing up both hands. Can you at least let us out? I can hoof it. Not on the hill, the driver said. You'll slip and fall. We wait. She sounded tired, not mean. The baby shifted, made a tiny sound. The mother kissed the top of the yellow blanket and held her closer. A clock on someone's phone had a way of getting louder at times like that. Some of us have jobs, the parka man said. There was a quiet murmur through the bus. People tugged gloves tighter. Some checked their shoes. The driver adjusted the mirror again. She took a breath like she could swallow other people's heat. A man in a cheap black puffer stood up from the back. I can help, he said, not to anyone in particular. His voice was low, careful. He looked at the driver, then at the half-buried sidewalk. Do you have salt? In the back locker, she said, but it's little, not for a hill. He looked through the pane at the corner store at the bottom of the block. A neon sign buzzed, haloed by snow. You open the door, he said to the driver. She hesitated. Rules had a way of putting their hands on her shoulders. She imagined a supervisor's mouth forming the word liability. She also imagined the baby getting colder and someone slipping anyway, and her large, heavy, breathing bus blocking this hill until June. Her eyes met his again. He had weary eyes, but they were steady. The bus floor vibrated under her boots. She hit the switch. He jogged into the corner store, breath smoking, palms stinging from the cold. He grabbed the only thing that looked usable, a bright blue bag of rock salt meant for steps, half of it already damp. He added 2 of those one-hand warmer packets from a basket by the register. He paid with singles and a handful of change, counting under his breath. The clerk looked at his jacket, then at the snow, and nodded without a word. He ran back, shoulders hunched against the wind. Door, he called, and the driver opened it fast. They spread the salt like they were feeding pigeons, small tosses in the dark. The man with the cheap jacket tossed a line in front of the back wheels first, then farther up where the tires wanted to go. The teenager in the red hoodie got off and took handfuls too. An older guy in a suit, who had been pretending to sleep, put on his leather gloves and stepped into the slush. The Parker man stayed on the steps filming for a second, then tucked his phone away and came down, eyes narrowed, like he wasn't sure who he was supposed to be right now. They sprinkled the street and stomped a path. Everyone back on, the driver called, and a voice had a lift to it. "I'm going to rock it." A few stayed by the fenders in case the back fishtailed. The man in the puffer put a hand flat on the side of the bus like he was listening to a big animal. The driver eased the throttle. The bus moved a half-inch, slid, then dug in where salt met rubber. It lurched. It groaned. It crept a foot, then 3, then enough that momentum turned to motion. People shouted without words. Then the bus cleared the ice patch and found the black stripe, and it was just a bus again. The baby started a thin, tired cry that sliced the bus in two. The mother rocked from heel to toe and whispered nothing words. Nothing words. The bus was moving now, but the baby was done with the cold and the waiting. The man in the cheap jacket shrugged off his puffer and handed it to the mother. "Take it," he said. "I'm warm." She didn't argue. She tucked the coat around the yellow bundle until only eyelashes showed. He pulled out his phone. The screen was cracked at the corner. "Where you going?" he asked the mother. "Clinic on 12th, she said, eyes glossy. 9:15. Shots." He nodded. He opened the ride app. His thumb hovered over the price for a second. He blinked, then hit confirm. "There's a ride waiting at the next flat stop," he said. "I'll walk back to grab my shift." He looked up at the driver. "Can you open one block down?" The driver looked at his coat on the baby and then at the snow in his hair. She tapped the hazard, didn't need any more. "Yeah," she said. "We'll make it work." He called his manager with the phone on speaker by accident. The bus hummed. He brought the phone to his ear and cupped his hand, but the angle made it audible enough in the quiet. "Where are you?" the voice said sharp. "Bus got stuck. I helped push. I'm getting off at 14th. I'll be 20, maybe 30. You had 2 latenesses already this month." A pause. "You know the policy. If you're not here in 20, don't come in. Turn in your key tonight." He breathed in and his shoulders dropped once. "All right," he said. He wasn't fighting. He wasn't pleading. He hung up and stared at the black screen. He clicked off the ringer. The Parker man watched him like he was reading a menu written in a language he didn't admit he didn't speak. At the next flat stop, a little grey sedan idled by the curb. The mother looked at him. "I'll bring your jacket back," she said, and made a face at her own words because they both knew she had no idea who he was or where to find him. He smiled and shook his head like it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. She got off, and the driver waited until the baby and the mother were in, until the dome light blinked out. Then she pulled back into the river and kept going. When the bus finally lurched free, a quiet fell that wasn't just relief. It was like everyone had agreed to stop being the version of themselves that the morning had pressed on them. The Parker man put his phone away and watched the window. The teenager took his board out of the aisle so the old guy in the suit could stretch his legs. Someone passed a granola bar up to the driver with a small for later gesture. The driver nodded and kept the wheel light. At a red light, the driver's thumb pressed a sticky note on the dash. There were 3 already. This one went over the old coffee ring mark. In tired handwriting it said, "Mom, 9 a.m. chemo." She didn't look at it long. She kept her face toward the road. The man in the cheap jacket saw it in the mirror and then looked away, like someone had walked in on someone else praying. He scrolled his messages with his thumb. There was one from a number saved as landlord that said, "Half by Friday." There was another missed call from a contact saved as Ma, and he saw his own face reflected in the screen, the crack breaking his cheek in 2. They rolled downhill into flatter streets. Traffic was thin but braver. A plow rumbled by and through a tide of grey slush that slapped the bus hard. The driver lifted her chin and let it happen. At 14th she opened the doors. The man in the cheap jacket stood, slung his bag, and hesitated. He put 2 folded hand warmers on the little ledge by the driver's cup. He didn't say anything like "you're amazing" or "thanks." He said, "Drive safe." It came out like a blessing, but maybe it was just what it was. She nodded. She looked him in the eye. "You too," she said. "Thank you." He stepped down into the day. The door folded behind him with a soft sigh, and the bus pulled away. After, tiny things shifted like new snow settling. The Parker man stayed on 2 more stops and got off and walked instead of transferring. At the corner, he saw a sedan with wheels spinning at an intersection, and he pushed from the front with two others until it bit and zipped away. His fur hood slung back. He didn't film it. He kept his hands out of his pockets and kept walking. The teenager in the red hoodie picked up two empty coffee cups rolling around the back and tossed them in the bus trash on his way out. He didn't tell anyone. He tapped his board to the floor twice before he left, like it was a thank you. And the driver heard it and thought of the way her own boy used to do that. An older woman who had kept her scarf up to her eyes stood in the aisle and told the driver about a good hardware store on Spruce that sometimes gave the transit guys extra sand for free. The driver nodded and wrote it on the top of one of the sticky notes, not looking at the woman so she wouldn't have to see the gratitude too close. And the mother in the grey sedan texted a thanks from the clinic waiting room to an unknown number she guessed was the right one. The message bounced. Wrong guess. She put her phone down and watched the yellow blanket rise and fall on her lap. He walked 2 extra blocks after getting off, slow in the hush. He wasn't in a hurry now. He could feel the wedges of time he had just opened, and how useless they were for him. His hands stung back to life. He turned his phone on and off again and felt the quiet, like a weight and like a mercy at the same time. A bus hissed by on a different street, and for a second he thought of the small plastic saint on the dash and smiled without knowing why. He stopped at a storefront with steamed-up windows and cheap stools. He counted his cash and ordered the cheapest breakfast. He warmed his fingers on the ceramic mug and pushed the plate of toast toward the two guys arguing at the end when he saw one of them stare at it like it might be a trick. "You want?" he said. They took it like it was a little nothing thing. It wasn't nothing. The cook behind the counter called out tickets to nobody named him. He checked his phone again. A new text from his mother said, "You working?" He typed, "Not this morning," and then he changed it to, "Soon." He touched the cracked corner and left it at that. He walked past the clinic later and saw the mother through the glass, the yellow blanket turned into a pile beside her on the chair. The baby's thigh was bandaged with a tiny cloud sticker. The mother's eyes were half closed. He didn't go in. He didn't wave. He kept walking because the point had never been about being seen. On her next loop, the driver stopped at a gas station and bought 2 more hand warmer packets. She put one in her left glove and one in her right, and thought about the way the bus had felt when the tires caught. A catch breath, a found footing. She took the road slower, not to be careful, but to be kind to her own hands. She got to the depot a minute after 9 and called her sister, who answered on the first ring from a plastic chair in a room that didn't smell like snow. "I'm here," her sister said. The driver took off her navy cap and took a breath. She didn't say anything about the hill or the boy in the red hoodie or the way a stranger's coat had looked, like a small yellow sun on a baby's chest. She said, "I'm on my way," and she went. People like to say it was fate, or a good city, or the spirit of winter, but it wasn't that. It was a man with a cheap black puffer and a cracked phone and a bag of rock salt that cost more than he wanted it to. It was a woman in a navy cap who broke a rule and opened a door. It was a bus full of people who tried on another way to be for a few minutes and found it fit. Back at the stop, the tracks in the snow filled with a soft blue light.